I am doing a 3-color challenge. So I found a random color scheme generator and I just hit randomize and grabbed not the first color scheme that came up because the first one was just like all one color, so I was like, okay, I'll try it again. I originally wanted to tweak how to do this challenge. I was thinking like I'll grab one really dark color, one mid-tone, and one highlight, but in the end I decided that that goes against the point of a color palette challenge because you're supposed to just get these random colors and still make something cool out of it. I can't be persnickety about what colors I get to use. However, I think like that part of the challenge is also kind of like to the challenge's detriment. With color palettes, you're usually given like mid-tones, and then from there, it's good to, you know, create shadows and highlights from it. So that your work isn't super flat and mid-tony and, you know, lacks contrast. So, like, doing these challenges is very, like, I find for my work, I find the results are always very boring because they lack, you know, like, depth and they're super flat. That's basically what it amounts to. And don't get me wrong, like I said, that's not really the point. The point is just to have like a big limitation on your work and still make something cool out of it. So I totally appreciate that. Because it is interesting seeing like what people decide to do with the limited colors, where it's like, here I only had like a blue, a pink, and a yellow, and I had a character who has more colors than that in his design. So this is my character Marble. He's from Scourge of Ninepoint. He's a cute little calico, and he's a rare male calico, because yes, I know that calicos are usually female, but anyways. Because you do get interesting results where you have to make compromises on, like, the color choices you use. I also really like when people will take an unorthodox color, like, I don't know, say your character has brown hair and you have a brown in your color scheme, but instead you use like a green or something. Like, that's always cool when they mix up like the different tones. I tried to keep it as close as possible with this one to his colors, because he's actually made of like red, blues, and oranges. So it was pretty close to what his actual colors are. So I tried to make it as close as possible. So it kind of turned out as this like neat little, not pastel-y, kind of like washed out, dusty kind of version of him. I also do like limited color palettes because it's very reminiscent of like lino block printing or screen printing or whatever. Mostly lino block because that's what I used to do in class all the time. But yeah, it's very reminiscent of like printmaking where you have limited colors. Not necessarily, you don't have to use limited colors with printmaking, but like you still get cool effects when you do limited color palettes. I also decided with this challenge I was going to limit how much like transparency use I did. I wanted to try and keep it to the 3 colors, but I found like the ones I was given, like I said, they're like super washed out. They're not super high contrast with each other, so I was like, okay, I will allow myself to do like limited transparency stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm allowed to do transparency on the background so that like he doesn't completely melt into it, and I'll do 1 layer of shadow on top. So like when I was learning about how to color things, my work was very like, it was either very mid-tone, so a lot like this, where like all the colors had the same value, where they were all like super light or super dark, and all the shapes melded together because of that. Nothing like stood out. There wasn't contrast. You couldn't understand like the forms of anything, or they were really boring. So when you're picking like actual color palettes, not just like a limited challenge, when you're picking an actual color palette to work with, like always make sure that you're considering like what the shadows look like, and there's good contrast between your shadows and your highlights, that it's not all like right in the middle of the spectrum and super gray, and make sure that you're mixing up like the vibrancy as well. So like you want some hues to be really gray and you want some of them to be really vibrant, just so that like different parts will stick out and be interesting. whereas some of them will fade into the background. I mean, you can also look into how, like, actual shadows play on things, and, like, parts of the shadow will be, like, super saturated and some of them will be super gray. I think that's something I really struggled with, like, when I first started doing, like, color work, was, like, I thought that shadows were made of, like, gray and black, but shadows are actually super vibrant. They're made of, like, deep purples and browns and blues, and yeah, it adds a lot more, like, depth to your work when you start working with those in your shadows. I think that's, like, if I made a video ever about, like, top things to not do when you're a new artist, one of them would definitely be, like, don't use black for your shadows, because that's not what shadows are. I remember my art teacher talking about that a lot in high school, because a lot of people do it. And it makes sense, because, like, you think of shadows, you think of, like, the color black. I definitely wish for this color palette that there was more, like, difference in the saturation. Like, admittedly, the yellow's pretty bright compared to the pink and the blue, but, like, I guess it's a purple. It's bluey, but it's like a purple, if you look down at the color wheel there. But, yeah, I really wish there was more contrast in the vibrancy. But here I am, just wishing I wasn't doing a challenge, even though I decided to do a challenge, so I should stop complaining. Ooh. Yeah, the biggest difficulty with this is, like, I feel like my piece turned out really flat. And it's, like, it turned out really cute. It reminds me a lot of, like, old comics, when they were only, like, 3 or 4 colors. And, like, the colors would be, like, super vibrant, and then there'd be, like, it would contrast well with, like, the black inks and stuff. If I was doing 4 colors, I would probably do something like that, where I could use these colors and then have, like, black lines, and that would probably look pretty heckin' cool. So maybe one day I'll do that. But, yeah, I guess, like, the dustiness of these colors kind of reminds me of, like, a very retro, vintagey look. Yeah, very, like, offset printing, or, like, maybe not offset, what am I talking about? Yeah, like I said, like, printmaking type style, because it's so limited. Yeah, that's offset, isn't it? Offset printing, it's where they lay down one color at a time. Maybe. I don't know what I'm talking about. Colors is hard. I probably could have done more with, like, suggesting form through, like, shadow, instead of trying to stay true to, like, the flat colors of the character. So, like, instead of staying true to, like, his fur color or his clothing color, if I just used them as, like, my yellow as my highlight, my red as my mid-tone, and my black for, like, shadows. Not my black, the purple for shadows. I probably could have done something a little more dynamic. Maybe. Possibly. I think a challenge like this also benefits if you do use more transparency than I did. Because if you say, like... Because if you look at, say, like, a 3 marker challenge, where it's traditional work, right? Because markers, like, naturally have transparency to them, you can really build up layers. Whereas with this, like, which is very, like, flat and solid, I had to rely on shape a lot more rather than, like, shading. Or value, I mean. Yeah, it came off very flat. Whereas if I played more with transparency, I probably could have had a much more, like, in-depth image. Maybe. I think it would be really fun to do, like, a comic in this style, where it's, like, very flat, with, like, limited colors, really focused on, like, highlights and shadows, like, obviously more than I did with this piece. But I think that would be really cute. And, like, this kind of, like, dusty palette is growing on me. Definitely would opt for more contrast, because that would probably make the comic, like, look more lovely and delicious. But, like, the base of this color palette is growing on me, let me tell you. I think this challenge is really great for just, like, warming up. It's great for just, like, I guess, like, making a little doodle that still has, like, personality and makes you think. Because, like, the way I define doodling is when I'm just sitting there, like, mindlessly drawing, and I usually just come up with, like, the same character doing the same thing, and it's really boring, and it doesn't really do anything for me except give me, like, a little relaxation. But doing this is, like, a really nice way to warm up. You get a really cute piece out of it at the end. You get to It makes you think a little bit because of the limitation of the palette, and you have to make sure that, like, your forms are coming through, and that, like, with limitations, you have to make some, like, interesting choices, or I guess, like, more thoughtful choices about where you're placing things and, like, what color you're using, etc. So it's a good way to, like, get yourself to think, and then think creatively because you've got those limitations on you. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this for, like, a little way to challenge yourself to try out new colors. That's also another thing. I think this did end up giving me, like, a palette that I probably would pick on my own, because I'm like, I love pinks and purples. That's, like, every single color palette I ever choose. But, you know, randomizing a color palette will definitely get you, like, maybe a palette that you've never done, so you can experiment and go outside of your comfort zone. But yeah, definitely a great way to warm up. I'm gonna go work on... there was a bug. Ew. Anyways, I'm gonna go run away from the bugs, and I'm gonna go work on Magpie, because I have a deadline. Ooh woo. Okay guys, go get your work done, meet your deadlines, have fun. If you're working on your art, good, I'm proud of you. You can do it. Do your best. And make sure to get up and stretch and take a break and drink some water, because you gotta take care of you. Okay, thank you for listening. I'm like, I gotta get back to work. Ooh, but I hope this was entertaining and fun. And it was really fun just taking a break and drawing marble all cute. And yeah, I like these colors. I sound... oh my gosh, I sound like such a, like, little cynic, because I'm like, oh, there's not enough contrast, but I did have fun. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to watch more videos about comics and art and webcomics and stuff. Okay, thank you for listening. Goodbye!